Welcome to this episode of ATSFE, ATS Fully Engaged Battlefield Walkarounds. ATSFE BWs are created to discuss the historical situation of a particular module, briefly mention the components, and more importantly, what may or may not be missing in those components. Let you know if there's a VATS or a Vassal ATS module, and then dive deep into those counters and scenarios and module notes, the real BW and the map. In today's episode, I'll be taking a look at Arnhem, Graebner's Charge, 1944. This is a kind of a redo of the original Arnhem, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So the historical situation is Market Garden, right? The British 1st Airborne drops into Arnhem. Frost's battalion makes it to the bridge and defends it against all comers for several days. So that's pretty much what this module covers. So we'll go over a little bit of that map and the situation. But what you get in the Ziploc, you get 6 of the overlapping map panels. Talk about a little bit more about that later. You get a half sheet of German AFVs with a few and heavy weapons. Actually, there are no German heavy weapons on it. AFVs and APCs, and then some British vehicles and heavy weapons. A few of those. You get 11 scenarios, which is an increase from the ones that came in Arnhem. You get obviously a Battlefield 4 pages of Battlefield Walkaround, 8.5 by 11 sheets, and 3 full vehicle cards, which is interesting. One thing to note, it does not come with all the counters you need, and that's by design. It says so in the product description. So you're going to have British personnel, British AFVs and weapons, German personnel, and German AFVs and weapons. Although you do get some in that half sheet of counters, like I said. So in general, one of the interesting things about this particular module is the macro scenario that comes with it. And again, we'll go into that a little bit more later. But one of the things I wanted to point out is the note in the Battlefield Walkaround was pretty interesting. The macro scenario provides as free bonus, it is meant to not penalize the diehard ATSer that owns more than enough counters and AFE cards to play it. In other words, we brought this huge scenario for you so you can go buy more stuff. So without further ado, let's take a deep dive into some of the components. Like I said, the counters, it doesn't come with everything everything you need to play. You do get this lovely little half sheet of counters. You can see it's mostly German vehicles and then some British vehicles and some heavy weapons. I think most of these make an appearance in the scenarios. I checked quite a few of them. I didn't check all of them. The one I didn't find was the B2F. It's on the counter sheet. I didn't see it in any of the scenarios. But like I said, I didn't check too closely on that particular one. So that's kind of it for the counters. Like I said, nothing super extraordinary there. The scenarios now, that's pretty interesting. Like I said, there are 11 scenarios. The first 6 are pretty much the same as that come in Arnhem, with a couple of name changes. So Night March will be familiar, Graebner's Charge, which is the name of this product, but was just a scenario in the initial one. With Breakfast, you get Germans. That's a name change. I don't remember what the original one was. The Stand was a slight name change. It used to be called Pongo's Stand, because it was the stand of Company C under Major Pongo Lewis. So here we go. Woe Muhammad is scenario 5. That is not a name change. That scenario was in there. And then scenario 6 was Grinding Forward, and again that name changed, and I don't remember what it was before. But 7 and 8 are different, completely different in this module than they are in the original. And then 9 and 10 and 11 are completely new for this one. 11 being that huge macro scenario, which I want to talk about a little bit of. And the scenarios pretty much range anywhere from Night March, which, small portion of the map, 10, 15 counters on the side, to the big, let me get the 11A, right? The Bridge Too Far scenario, 48 turns, including overnight. Takes up 4 8.5 by 11 pages to describe the whole thing. A lot of Brits, a lot of Germans. Germans come on in reinforcement waves. In between, you get, like I said, the scenarios are pretty much the same as the original. Some of them are actually fairly large, use the whole map. Some use maybe a third of the map. And some use even smaller portions of the map that are a little counter-dense. All of them look pretty good. I think the longest one, other than that bridge too far, is 7 turns. Looks like it. So it looks like pretty good wide variety of stuff that it kind of uses most of the map. You know, section here, section there, section over here, and then a couple that use or a few that use the whole map, which is pretty nice. Most of the scenarios, actually I'll say 10 of the 11 scenarios are set in the September Market Garden time frame. One scenario, which is scenario 10, excuse me, is set in April 1945, and it's the 49th Infantry Division, excuse me, 49th Infantry Division, elements of the 49th Infantry Division, with support from the 11th Canadian Armored Regiment, 5th Canadian Armored Division, and this is obviously late war. It's when they, you know, round 2 of trying to take back Arnhem from the Germans, I suppose. So that's pretty much it for the scenarios. We will move on to the map. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the Battlefield Walkaround in particular, other than maybe some of the interesting terrain elements that it talks about, because of it's tied. The special rules are mostly tied to the map itself. So let's see if we can get a nice wide angle view here. So here's the map in all of its glory. Map panels, of course, and of course my little pet peeve. You can almost get them all to line up except in certain parts of the map panels, which of course my pet peeve in a game which relies on line of sight. It's kind of crucial that those hexes line up, which is why I like the full map presentation. I will talk about one of the interesting rules in the Battlefield Walkaround, and that is British interior wall infiltration. So British units can infiltrate across those hex sides, but they cannot move, fire, or do grenade fire. So normal games, right, you have this black bar, you can't move across that hex side. The British can infiltrate, and of course that's representing the fact that they would punch holes through the building, the walls of the heavy stone walls of the buildings, in order to get through there and turn them into veritable fortresses, right? So some of the interesting things you can see in this particular map, you get a little bit of the bank here. You've got the bridge, and then the buildings surrounding the bridge. And then, you know, the defensive perimeter was kind of like this a little bit. So you get some of that. Here's the Eusebius Cathedral, which is a pretty big building. You know, these arrows denote you can only get into it from this direction. These are the only entrances into the building. Or into the cathedral itself. You can see there's high walls, low walls, hedges, orchards, rail line that runs all the way through here. This is an interesting part of the map. This is a +10 building location across the top of this, and it's a roadway underneath. There is no ground level building location there. You can see that the bridge comes down onto this little hill here and then drives on. A little pond up there. For the most part, pretty straightforward terrain, right? So some of the interesting things, and here we're going to do some show and tell. Oops. Sorry about that. Hope nobody got sick there. Let's pull out the original Arnhem map. Bear with me a second while I get this out. Take a look at the original Arnhem. Notice it's 2 full sheets. So it is 2 full sheets. So you're not going to have too much of a problem lining it up. So for the most part, so here's that Eusebius Cathedral. You can see here there were just dots kind of showing, I think, entrances, and there seemed to be quite a few more on this one. So I'm not really sure how that works. I did not go back and read the Battlefield Walkaround on that particular one. You'll notice you get a few more hexes. Where's the cathedral? You get a few more hexes off to the side here. The map on the old one just cuts off right there, right? put this kind of semi back together. You can see, obviously, this map ends with just part of the bridge on here. This map, you get a bunch of the bridge on the other side of the bank. On this side of the map, it's pretty much about the same. I mean, there's there's a little bit more of the road or the hex that has the road on the newer map than on the old map. And in the top one, it's almost the same, except there's maybe a few hexes up here, and this pond is not on the old map at all. So one of the interesting things, again, was in here, this 337 hex side building art. Buildings on the Arnhem Bridge map do not straight across hex sides. Well, that's because in the original map you had problems like this in the trolley house, where this little sliver they drew it true to form, and so it's kind of into the hex. I would not call this a building hex. This would be an open hex. But so what you can see they did here is they just regularized it and punched it into there. This building they turned sideways, because here you can see it's right along the hex line, kind of bumps into FF12 here, and the hex numbers did change, by the way. This is JJ12 on the new building as opposed to HH12 on the new map as opposed to HH12 on the old map. One of the interesting things I did notice, let me see if I can do this, pull that up a little bit, is down here on the southern end of the bridge, I'm sorry, the top of the bridge here, you can see, so on the old map, there's these buildings along the bank, and a couple wooden buildings there on either side, and some mason buildings. On the new map, in the bank there are no wooden buildings, but there's these, which I'm assuming are supposed to be the same thing, and then these are all masonry. So kind of zoom out here and show that again. There we go. So you can see the difference between those, right? So interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's just different scholarship or what have you. One thing I do like to point out on this bridge, on this map that I love, is the shadow of the bridge that you can see. Because it's elevated, right? So you can go underneath the bridge here on the road. You can go underneath the bridge here. It's pretty neat. So that's pretty much it for the Battlefield Walkaround for Graebner's Charge. Where'd it go? Again, pretty neat product. You know, I think you could get your money's worth out of it if you had the old one and the new one. There are at least 3 new scenarios, plus that Uber Monster Macro scenario, which looks like it'd be a hoot and a half to play. Although, like I said, it takes up 4 cards and uses, I don't know, several hundred counters. So you need to make sure you own them all. That pretty much will wrap up the ATSFE Battlefield Walkaround for Graebner's Charge. Hope you enjoyed it.